There comes a moment in history when God stops whispering and begins to shake the earth. A moment when the signs around us are no longer subtle, no longer quiet, no longer hidden behind everyday routines. And I'm here to tell you, it has already begun. The world is not waiting on God. The world is catching up to what God has already set in motion. Look around. The systems people trusted have begun to wobble. Institutions once thought unshakable are trembling. People are searching, yearning, hungering for clarity. And while the world keeps calling it confusion, heaven calls it a wake-up call. What you see is not chaos. It's a divine alarm sounding across nations, reminding humanity that God is still on the throne and his purposes cannot be stopped. This final alert is not sent to frighten you, but to awaken you. God shakes what people depend on so they'll return to what truly matters. When the lights of culture dim, when leaders fall, when the comforts of life slip through our fingers, God is saying, lift your eyes. You were never meant to anchor your hope in the temporary. God's alert is calling families back to alignment, calling leaders back to integrity, calling nations back to humility, calling individuals back to repentance. And most of all, calling every heart to remember that eternity is closer than it has ever been. But hear me today, God never sends an alert without a purpose. Every shaking is the setup for a new strengthening. Every disruption is the doorway to a divine reset. Every warning is an invitation to step into a deeper walk with God, a higher level of purpose, and a renewed spiritual awareness. This is not the season to sleep. This is the season to stand. Not the time to be distracted by the noise of the world, but the time to be anchored in the voice of God. Because when God is preparing a shift, those who are spiritually awake will not fear the shaking. They will understand it. They will move with it. They will rise through it. The final alert to the world is simple. Get ready, get aligned, get serious, because what is coming next is not for the lukewarm. God is raising people with courage, conviction, and clarity, people who will walk by faith when the world walks in fear, people who will choose righteousness when the world chooses compromise, people who know that when God begins a thing, he also provides the grace to stand in it. You are not living in an ordinary hour. You are living in a prophetic one. The question is not whether God is moving. He already has. The question is, are you awake enough to move with him? When we say God has already begun shaking the world, we are not pointing to specific headlines or predicting earthly events. We are talking about the spiritual reality that becomes visible when people drift too far from their purpose. Throughout history, whenever humanity grows numb, distracted, or disconnected from the truth, God allows a stirring to take place. That stirring can be internal, external, personal, or global, but its purpose is always the same: to wake people up. This shaking is not about fear, it is about focus. It is the gentle but firm reminder that life is bigger than routines, bigger than comfort, and bigger than human systems. When people become too reliant on what they built, God reminds them who the true foundation is. You may feel this shaking in the uncertainty many experience today, not necessarily through catastrophic events, but through a sense of restlessness in the human heart. People are searching for identity, longing for security, and craving direction. The shaking exposes the emptiness of anything that tries to replace God's place in a person's life. It is a spiritual alarm designed to break the illusion that human strength, wealth, or knowledge can keep the soul steady. When God shakes, it is because he sees drift. He sees how far people have wandered from what gives them true life. So he begins stirring hearts, tugging on souls, and removing false peace. The shaking also shows up in the moral confusion spreading across families and societies. When right becomes blurry and wrong becomes normal, when people call compromise freedom and spiritual blindness progress, God does not stay silent. He begins waking people from spiritual sleep, nudging them to see that something is missing, something is off, something is calling them back. This inner nudge is one of God's greatest gifts. It disrupts comfort so truth can rise. It interrupts routine so purpose can speak. It breaks patterns so transformation can begin. People often think the shaking is punishment, but more often it is protection. There is also a shaking inside individuals, a stirring of conscience, a sudden desire to change, a conviction that whispers, "You were made for more than this." God uses this inner shaking to peel away layers of distraction and awaken a hunger for Him. And once that hunger rises, nothing temporary can satisfy it again. The shaking opens spiritual eyes, clears spiritual ears, and softens spiritual hearts. It prepares people for deeper wisdom, deeper maturity, and deeper faith. Without the shaking, many would stay stuck in cycles that drain them and choices that diminish them. What has begun is not destruction, but divine alignment. It is the rearranging of priorities, the burning away of what is shallow, and the rebuilding of what is eternal. When God shakes, He is not removing what you need, He is removing what holds you back. He shakes relationships that are unhealthy, mindsets that are limiting, habits that are destructive, and environments that are spiritually dull. And through it all, He is calling people to awaken to a new level of seriousness, awareness, and spiritual sensitivity. The shaking is simply God's way of saying, "I am still here. I am still speaking, and I want you to hear me now more than ever." The instability people feel in the world today is not just a collection of random shifts and unexpected changes. It is a mirror reflecting deeper spiritual needs that have long been ignored. When the structures humanity trusted begin to feel shaky, it forces people to look beyond human capability and re-examine what they've built their lives upon. This instability is a reminder that no matter how advanced society becomes, it cannot outrun the need for spiritual grounding. People often assume that when life becomes unpredictable, it is merely the result of human failure. But spiritually, it is often God's way of drawing attention back to what matters. When false foundations begin to crack, it becomes clearer where truth actually stands. What many call confusion is often the result of living in a world that has slowly drifted from spiritual clarity. Moral values shift, priorities become blurred, and the lines between right and wrong fade into personal preference. This lack of clarity produces instability in individuals, families, and entire communities. It creates tension, conflict, and uncertainty because people find themselves trying to navigate life without a consistent standard to guide them. In moments like these, God uses instability not as a weapon, but as an alarm. He allows people to see the limits of human wisdom and the cost of ignoring spiritual truth. When everything feels shaky, it becomes easier to realize how much people need a foundation that cannot be moved. This wake-up call extends beyond internal struggle. You can feel it in society as people look for identity in temporary things, attach their worth to unstable sources, or build their confidence on shifting cultural trends. When those things fail, and they always do, people are forced to confront questions they've been avoiding. What is truly secure? What is worth building my life on? What gives meaning that lasts? Those moments of questioning are not signs of collapse. They are signs of awakening. God uses the instability of the world to guide people back to the stability of His truth. He lets temporary things fall so eternal things can stand out more clearly. This shaking also reveals what people have been depending on without realizing it. Some place their security in financial stability, others in relationships, careers, social approval, or personal control. When any of those areas become uncertain, frustration rises, but that frustration is often a signal pointing toward misplaced trust. God's intent is not to take away what is good, but to remove the illusion that anything besides Him can hold a life together. The instability exposes where hope has been anchored, and it gently redirects the heart toward a place of lasting peace. In the midst of all this, the instability also creates an opportunity for clarity. When false lights fade, the true light becomes easier to see. When the noise of the world becomes overwhelming, the voice of truth grows more valuable. People begin to search deeper, pray more sincerely, and reflect more honestly. They ask questions that awaken the soul and open the door to transformation. This is why the instability is not something to fear. It is God's way of inviting people back to alignment, purpose, and spiritual vision. It is his gentle reminder that while the world may shake, he does not. And when he calls through the shaking, it is always to lead people into something stronger. When God sends an alert, it is never meant to crush, frighten, or overwhelm. It is meant to awaken, invite, and redirect. People often misunderstand divine warnings because they view them through the lens of fear rather than love. But God's alerts always come wrapped in purpose. They are the voice of a father who sees danger ahead, who sees the drift of the heart, who sees the consequences of choices long before people experience them. The alert is his way of calling people out of patterns that weaken them and into a place where it is the wisdom to recognize what truly matters and what is simply noise. When people lack clarity, they chase things that do not satisfy, invest in what does not last, and overlook what is most important. But God's alert cuts through the fog. It sharpens vision, awakens discernment, and reveals truth. It helps people see the difference between what is urgent and what is essential. It brings the kind of understanding that strengthens decisions and guides purpose, most importantly. This alert is a call to readiness. Readiness is a posture of the heart. It means being alert, aware, and spiritually awake. It means living with a sense of purpose rather than drifting through life passively. God uses his alert to prepare people for what he wants to do in them and through them. It is his way of drawing them into deeper faith, greater courage, and stronger conviction. The alert is not a threat. It is preparation for the next chapter. It is the loving reminder that God is not finished, that something greater is unfolding, and that he wants every heart ready to walk in it. This season requires a level of spiritual alertness that goes beyond casual faith or routine belief. It demands a heart that listens, a mind that discerns, and a spirit that refuses to be lulled into complacency. When the world becomes noisy, distracted, and overwhelmed by uncertainty, it becomes easy for people to drift, to fall asleep spiritually, while life keeps moving around them. But in moments of divine shaking, those who remain spiritually awake will see what others miss. They will hear what others ignore. They will sense what others overlook. Alertness is the ability to stay tuned to God's voice, even when the world is broadcasting fear, confusion, or distraction on every channel. This is a time when faith cannot be passive. Passive faith waits for things to settle. Active faith stands firm in the storm. Passive faith is shaken by pressure. Active faith grows under pressure. When God is signaling that the atmosphere is shifting, only those who cultivate closeness with him will walk with clarity. Spiritual alertness is developed through intentional connection, through prayer that listens, reflection that humbles, and obedience that transforms. It means being open enough to let God correct, guide, and redirect. It means paying attention not only to what is happening in the world, but also to what is happening in the heart. Being spiritually awake also means being aware of the subtle distractions that slowly dull a person's spiritual senses. Distractions rarely appear dangerous, they appear comfortable. They show up as habits, routines, unhealthy relationships, misplaced priorities, or emotional pressures that quietly pull the heart away from the things that truly matter. When people are spiritually asleep, they don't notice how these distractions gradually reshape their thinking, weaken their conviction, and steal their sense of purpose. Alertness is the ability to notice when something is pulling you away from who you are meant to be. It is the awareness that every choice either strengthens or weakens the soul. This season calls for unwavering faith, faith that stands even when answers seem delayed, even when circumstances feel unstable, even when emotions try to take control. Faith is not the absence of uncertainty. It is the decision to trust God in the midst of it. It is the willingness to say, even when I do not understand, I will still believe. Those who hold on to this kind of faith become anchors in a world full of storms. They refuse to be driven by fear. They refuse to be controlled by panic. They refuse to retreat into spiritual numbness. Their faith becomes a steady light that guides not only themselves, but also those around them. Spiritual alertness is also about readiness. Readiness to move when God speaks. Readiness to change when God corrects. Readiness to step forward when God opens the door. Those who stay awake spiritually are not surprised when things shift. They are prepared. They are positioned. They understand that every season of shaking is also a season of opportunity. They realize that when others collapse in uncertainty, those rooted in God rise in confidence. Those who remain spiritually awake will not be shaken by what comes. Instead, they will become strong enough to navigate it with wisdom, stability, and peace. The world may tremble, but their foundation remains unmovable because their trust is planted in something eternal. You are living in a moment that is pulling people out of spiritual comfort and into a place of purpose, conviction, and boldness. This is not a season for half-hearted commitment or shallow belief. It is a season where God is stirring the hearts of those who are willing to stand when others sit, speak when others stay silent, and move forward when others freeze in fear. The shaking happening around the world is preparing individuals for a deeper calling, one that requires courage to live differently from the surrounding culture. When things shift spiritually, the ones who rise are those who recognize that their life has a divine assignment attached to it. That assignment cannot be fulfilled with lukewarm passion or casual obedience. It requires strength that comes from intimacy with God, clarity that comes from spiritual maturity, and courage that comes from knowing who you are and who you belong to. People who step into this moment with boldness are not reckless, they are rooted. They do not draw courage from their own strength, but from their connection to something greater than themselves. They understand that every challenge is a doorway to deeper trust. Every pressure is an opportunity for growth. Every moment of uncertainty becomes a platform for faith to shine. These individuals know they were not created to blend in with fear or follow the turmoil of society. They were created to be lights in the middle of darkness, voices of truth when confusion grows loud, and carriers of peace when anxiety fills the atmosphere. Their courage is not loud or arrogant. It is steady, unwavering, and deeply anchored. This prophetic moment calls for people who are willing to stand for what is right, even when doing so is unpopular, inconvenient, or misunderstood. It calls for people who refuse to compromise their values just to be accepted by others. It calls for individuals who choose integrity even when shortcuts seem easier, who choose faith even when doubt whispers loudly, and who choose obedience even when the path is unfamiliar. These people understand that spiritual strength is not built by accident. It is developed through choices, daily choices to prioritize truth over comfort, faith over fear, purpose over distraction. Those who rise in this season also carry a sense of mission. They understand that their life influences more than just themselves. Their courage inspires others. Their consistency stabilizes others. Their faith awakens others. They are the ones God uses to shift atmospheres, restore families, encourage communities, and strengthen those who feel weak. Their purpose is not confined to a pulpit or a stage. It is lived out in everyday decisions, conversations, and acts of compassion. They know that God is looking for people who will say yes, even when they don't know all the details. Because a willing heart is more powerful than a perfect plan. As the world continues to move through uncertain times, these individuals become reflections of divine steadiness. Their lives show that it is possible to remain calm when the world panics, hopeful when the world grows cynical, and strong when the world feels fragile. What is unfolding in this season requires people who understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to bow to it. They step forward not because everything is easy, but because they know something greater than the struggle is guiding them. They rise not because the path is clear, but because their faith is steady. And in doing so, they become living reminders that purpose is strongest in seasons of pressure, and that God equips every willing heart for the moment they were created for. Thank you.